2020 F5 season is very, very close. I'm kind of counting the days down. I've discussed, and I can tell you any beat writer or anybody in my position, it's it gets to the point where you're just waiting for the season to start. You're waiting for camp to start. You're waiting to really get things going and really see the progress that this team has made. That SEC podcast put out a wouldn't say in this article, it was for pretty much all 16 SEC teams, noting the most important 3 games of the season. And so for A&M, they included Texas #1, which, we can discuss that. I don't know if it's the #1 game. See, at the end of the year, A&M season will probably be decided by then, in my opinion. And then it was Auburn at home and Florida at home. So I agree with that. Billy Lucci at Texas kind of quote tweeted that and said, well, I believe that, Auburn and Florida are very important because you have to win those games midseason to get to the point you want to, which is the college football playoff. But Notre Dame at the beginning of the year, which is a week 3 matchup on the road, me and Cannon discussed that early in our maybe last month about the importance of that game and really winning that one on the road could basically solidify your season. It could give you that momentum going forward. So anyways, you guys, your opinions on if those are the 3 most important games, if he's right there, because I can honestly go different ways with that. I just know obviously they're always going to say Texas is #1 because of the rivalry.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if it's an end of the season game in this new college football playoff, the expanded playoff structure, it may be meaningless. It may mean a lot, but it may be meaningless. And I would put it as 3 or 4, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that a lot of A&M fans have, when they first saw the schedule, they saw, okay, we're kind of getting a lot of these games already flipped on their heads because that's how scheduling works now in the SEC. So that Florida one at home, I think, is really the one that A&M fans and myself especially were circling. And it's kind of like, hey, they are coming in at a pivotal time for their team and ours, because at that point you have no idea what Florida could be, because they would have what's the date again? Do they play Texas the week before, the week after us? Muted again.
Yeah, let me get this for you. I believe it is.
Because in my mind, that when DJ Lagway comes back to the state of Texas and tries to put on what Napier and his staff always wanted him to be at Florida, notwithstanding that he gets hurt again. And you can kind of, what is that date again?
Yeah, so they play. So yeah, for everybody, Auburn is the first. That's the SEC opener. So they play that on September 27th, and then 2 weeks later they host Florida on October 11th. So that's going to be the 3rd SEC game.
Gotcha. Okay. And looking at that, I mean, Florida is going to have a much more upgraded offensive line. I think they have a lot of returning guys on that offensive line to protect Lagway. This is a full offseason under Lagway, even with the little injury that he had. But Napier said he's pretty much up and ready to go. He's throwing around and everything. When he comes back, I think that's the one where you had all the rumors that before Lagway officially made pen to paper against with Florida, while A&M was going through their process, and after Mike Elko was immediately hired, there was kind of a little bit of smoke of like, oh, A&M's trying to get Lagway before this season, and eventually missed out on him. And you see him go and have all of these highlight plays before he gets injured, even with Graham Mertz going down as well. If he's coming into A&M, you know that there's going to be a couple of those players that are not going to want to let him have his day with his defense, especially after the last games going at the end of last season. So I think the one that I'm circling is Florida out of those 3. And maybe I'm wrong. Landon, do you look at Florida kind of the same way, in at least out of one of the more important games of the season? Are you kind of leaning more towards like a road game against LSU or the home game against like Auburn?
I think Florida is probably the biggest one, in my opinion, I'm circling, just because of the fact it's also one of the bigger home games for recruiting purposes. You got to win one of those games. But I think Lagway coming back home, he's going to try to win the game, and I think that's the game I'm circling as well.
Gotcha. And before we let you go here, are there any games that you're kind of having a sneaking suspicion are going to be bigger on the radar come the time when they're going to be played that maybe A&M fans aren't looking at right now? I know that at that SEC podcast we're saying these were the three they're circling, but maybe it's one at the start of the season that people are overlooking, or maybe it's one further down towards the end of the season that people are just completely blowing past.
I go Auburn. Auburn's always a tricky opponent. And then just Cam Coleman. And then I'll go South Carolina because that could potentially be a top 10 showdown.
Yeah, definitely. I think
those are two for me.
Yeah. Is it more the quarterbacks of these teams kind of being that unknown coming into at home?
Yep. Well, yeah, Sellers absolutely fried A&M last year
because it's physicality. That's going to be the draw, and I think that's why a lot of people say I'd agree with Lana there. I think that South Carolina, you play, looking at the schedule now, this is one of the reasons why people believe it's so tough, because you are playing Arkansas now on the road. And Arkansas is going to be one of those teams where it's like, I don't really know what to think about them. I think they're going to be above average at best. I think that they're going to have moments where Taylor Green has a great game, and if he can stay healthy, if they can block up front, and I think they've got some decent wide receivers. But it's all going to be up to A&M secondary, which we've done deep dives on. We've talked about being somewhat improved, that at least they should be good enough to not allow big plays. So when you play Arkansas on the road, then you play LSU on the road, which many people think that's an automatic loss. It depends what kind of A&M team they are at that point. And then you have to play Missouri on the road, which is another one like Arkansas. No idea how good Missouri is going to be. I hear some people thinking this is a 9-win team. I have other people, including myself, thinking they're going to be a 6 or 7-win team. So, and I think really their star player is at running back. So it's like, it's kind of a weird kind of figure these teams out. But South Carolina, because of the physicality they play with, because of the defensive line they have, and returning, and they have some speed at wide receiver. I don't know what the running back situation is there. I think it's kind of up and down, but Sellers has a lot of pressure on him, right? He has a ton of pressure. And A&M, I'm going to be honest, the fact they're hosting them is better for the Aggies because they want some revenge, because this team embarrassed them last season. I remember watching that. I didn't go to that one because it was on the road and I had a family dispute, but I was actually watching my dad. I remember I was covering, my dad came down. He's like, what happened? It was 2020. And I went, they got out physical. They got just manhandled. And you could see South Carolina just laughing about it. And that stays in these guys' minds, especially Marcel Reed, who has gotten a little stronger this offseason, put some muscle on, because he took a lot of hits in that game. And I mean, took some hits, took some big blows.
He took some hits, but it was more the fact that in the South Carolina game, they could not make a tackle to save their life.
Yeah, they couldn't do anything. And that's another big, that's why I will say this for the 100th time. Lyle Hemphill came in here because of that. Yeah. Because they knew that just keeping Bateman there, he wasn't going to fix these problems, because that's just not how it works. They wanted to give Bateman a shot of helping out with game plans, giving Elko the reins of play calling, and bringing in a fresh mind, somebody who had a great season with James Madison last year. And if you watch James Madison, they tackled, they played very well in the secondary for the most part. They didn't have the talent A&M does. So, you can translate that and say, we're getting this coach in here now who's going to fix these issues, especially guys like Bryce Anderson, who had a lot of issues last season. If he can take the jump, those safeties can tackle, your linebackers are doing their job, and you have a healthy Scooby Williams with York, you're not going to have those issues. But that's the game I have circled. It's going to be
definitely a lot of unknown. Yeah. And I think that's a good way to kind of seamlessly transition Landon out of here, because I know he doesn't have a lot of time. Yeah. So Landon, kind of ending words, Florida's kind of the one that you're circling just because of the whole situation that they have at the quarterback.
For sure. That's the one I'm circling the most.
Yeah, awesome.
Lagaway, does he have a revenge game in him? Is it revenge, I guess, because he was a backup last season. So, yeah. So to continue that, it's going to be one of those things where we're going to figure out who A&M is by mid-season. And I think that's why they listed those games. I'm just always going to say, we can talk about Texas briefly. I just think that Texas has a lot that they have to figure out. I know that, like, and I saw today Steve Sarkisian was on with I forget who the host was, but he was talking about the wide receiver room, and I was actually talking about the other day with somebody else. It's a very young wide receiver room, right? They're putting new faces in there. Yeah, they have some 5-star guys and a couple returning guys who were kind of rotational guys, but they don't have a clear number one yet. No. And they don't really know who Arch Manning's go-to option is going to be. They have to replace the tight end position. It was very, very good for them last season. They have 2 new bookend starters at tackle. And outside on defense, they have an elite secondary. I think it's going to be one of the better in the country, just literally blue chip players and returning veterans. And obviously when you have Anthony Hill at linebacker and Colin Simmons rushing the passer, you're going to have a good defense. But this is a chance. Yeah, go ahead.
I think what they've done is they've granted this pillow for the offense to kind of not have to be on the field as much as it has to be, so that they can allow Arch Manning, these young wide receivers, to kind of blossom. I think that's what they're trying to do, because you saw them. They didn't even go to the portal at all for offensive linemen.
Yeah, they believe what they have.
Yeah, they believe what they have, which is a testament to Kyle Flood. And I know Kyle Flood's very, very well respected in his line of work for the offensive line building. I look at it, and even with that pillow of like 5 defensive line transfers, 1 or 2 people in the secondary, you talked about Anthony Hill before. Will that pillow be enough to where at the end of the season, A&M going into their stadium, and it's kind of like, all right, is it going to be like another toss-up game? Like we kind of had that conversation this past year where Texas really hadn't played a good enough schedule so far, so to say, to where they didn't know against a proven opponent what was happening, because they beat Florida without DJ Lagway. I believe it was a 3rd string starter. They had a couple of games where Quinn Ewers went down and everybody was cheering for Arch Manning to come in. Like what was their goal? And I think that it kind of gets lost in translation. Like that game at the end of the year, end of the regular season last year at Kyle Field, even though the ending was how it went, going into it, you're going, could A&M pull this out to where they go to an SEC championship game?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's where my head's at. Is that pillow big enough for them? And I think that's what we're going to see going into that last game of the season, because we know A&M is going to be upgraded defensively, especially with the additions of Lyle Hemphill, like you said. Yeah. That secondary cannot be as bad as it was in those last 5 games. Absolutely.
Yeah. This is the thing. I will, if they struggle, I'll be the first one to admit it. But at the same time, I'm just very impressed when any coach, and you mentioned Kyle Flood. I have great respect for Kyle Flood. I think he knows what he's doing. I think Sarkisian trusts him, and we've seen Sarkisian has moved on from coaches in the past that are just not doing the job. And so power to them, they're doing a good job. This isn't a slight at Texas. Like, yes, it's an A&M show, and yeah, we hate Texas, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I want to see Arch Manning do well, because I want to see these kids live up to all this praise. I hate when, and we talked about DJ Lagway earlier, who I remember someone told me, and I mean, I kind of agreed with him. I'm like, okay, this is giving me vibes of like Josh Rosen and others, that when you put too much praise on these guys, they just don't deliver. So Lagway is an elite talent, elite arm, but he's got to become more accurate. He's got to have more touch. He's got to, and when we talk about touch, don't throw early Brett Favre passes, even though you can. Like, don't just throw it to your break in a guy's hand. I don't know if his arm's that strong, but you got to layer that thing, and you got to develop a rapport with your receiving core. So I know they're going to have a lot of high expectations because of the way they finished. So going back to that, yeah, that game's important because he's going to want to win in Texas. A&M beat the crap out of them in their own stadium, in the swamp, in a day where all the momentum was with them, because obviously Marshall Reed was making his first start. So it's that type of game. But it's just going to be, I think that the games that are going to define this team are 2 of the 3 road games against Arkansas, Missouri, and LSU. If you lose to LSU, but you win 9 games on the year, it doesn't matter, right? That's the thing, because I look at LSU, and that's why it wasn't listed, right? It wasn't listed on their list because the way that they beat LSU last year in Kyle Field, and losing 17-7. Marshall Reed comes in there and they just shred them on the ground. That stays with this team. You now get them in Death Valley. You get them in a environment where they hate A&M. It's become a very fierce rivalry, especially because of how the games have gone in the past. But that's the thing. Like, before that game happens, that's why I'm going back to Notre Dame. I'm kind of getting things tangled up here, but you beat Notre Dame on the road, a team that was this close to winning a national championship last year. Granted, they have a new quarterback, have a great defense, have a great secondary, one of the best in the country, per Pro Football Focus, who kind of ranked them the last month. And you get that done, you handle your business, and you come out of that. I give A&M a shot at every game, right? Because if you get that offensive momentum, you're running the ball well, you're utilizing your athletes. Marshall Reed looks above average in the pocket. He's hitting his targets. Casey Concepcion lives up to that number one standard. Then this team is going to be one of the best in the country, and that's why they've been praised throughout the offseason. And it's going to continue, and it's deserved. I'm going to be honest; it is deserved. I will say that even though they haven't produced in the past, they deserve it because there is elite level talent on this team. They just have to put it together. But we can move on from this. It's just we could talk this to death.
Well, the one more thing I want to say before moving on, I think it's a little bit. When you said that even if you were to lose to LSU on the road and it not necessarily matter, I think that would be kind of a little bit more of an understatement to where it's, well, if you're losing to LSU on the road, does that mean that you're also dropping road games to Texas and Notre Dame?
Yeah, that's kind of true. That's kind of true. If you lose to Notre Dame and LSU, if you beat Texas at the end of the year and you take care of business, the rest, it doesn't matter, right? But that doesn't seem accurate. I don't see them winning both Notre Dame and LSU. I just don't see it because of just the way football works and the way that some teams are healthier than others, home field advantage, revenge, LSU having Garrett Nussmeier. And I believe that, he's already looking pretty good, like the Manning Passing Academy I've heard. He's looking like that player we expect. He's going to be the star player for LSU. Very different type of offense compared to A&M, where Marshall Reed just has to be good enough. Yeah. Everything's on Nussmeier, like his NFL future, all of it's on him. So because of that, I don't give A&M a great chance but they'd have to win that game like they tried to win against South Carolina last year, right?
Yes.
And here's the thing, after Le'Veon Moss got hurt and was out for the rest of the year, that put a complete wrench in that entire offensive system. But if that can finally reach that momentum that we expect from Colin Klein, then that's why I give them a chance in those road games, because if you can control the ball, you avoid turnovers, you hit your targets, and you've got Le'Veon Moss and Ruben Owens just hitting those holes and getting chunk gains, it's going to be very, very hard to beat this team, because then we all know that's going to help the defense out. That's going to help the secondary out. It's going to put less pressure on them. And if the secondary, look, they're going to have a better season. I'm not going to say they're going to have a great season, because we don't know what guys like even Des Ricks are going to look like. We believe that Will Lee and Julian Humphrey, their new corner from Georgia, are going to be pretty good. I think that they're going to be your outside starters. But then you've got a couple other names that you think are going to take a next step, but at the same time, we just don't know yet, because we're going to see how much work Lyle Hemphill has put in.
Exactly.
Especially the safety rotation, which you and I discussed with Carter Carrolls during spring, where we were talking about position groups, and that was the one he kind of pointed out. He said, I just don't know yet, right? Because they've got good players, and they got guys like Marcus Radcliffe, who I think led the team in interceptions last year.
I believe he was either him or BJ Mays.
Yeah. And I think it was BJ Mays. Yeah. But Radcliffe had a good start to the season, right? He showed flashes, but then he played okay down the stretch, but not great. And so it's like, you got to play consistent football.
Yeah.
Get that from your cornerback rotation and your free safety rotation, then this team's going to be great. Because I've seen a lot of people in my comments with articles or something talking about all of A&M's strengths. A lot of them said, well, no. And I kind of love it that finally that narrative is starting to die out with Marcel Reed. of he has to be elite. He has to make every pass. He has to do this. No, the defense has to minimize explosive plays through the air. They cannot have games like they did against Auburn where they go down 21-0 and Cam Coleman has a not a revenge game. It's because he never even played for A&M, but he was committed to them once, so it's revenge, and just shredded them. And then, yes, they came back and they had a chance to win that game. But when you start out like that, it's very hard to win games like that. So if you just give A&M a chance to keep things close, I give the Aggies a chance in every single game. But I agree with your logic there. That was kind of dumb. I think you need to win.
It is unknown.
Yeah. I mean, what's your opinion? Like, how many road games does A&M have to win next season?
I think that in order to have even a chance at whatever this college football playoff format is going to be this next season, that has been finalized, correct? I believe that's just kind of the same format of the top 16, whatever, or top 12, whatever it is. I think if you want to even have a chance at that, then that means bar none, you are going to have to win on the road at either LSU or Texas, bar none. Because your other road games in the SEC are Missouri and Arkansas. I mean, teams that
and I think it depends, right?
According to like betting odds that you are probably favored in a couple of those games. I think when you go into places like Death Valley in Baton Rouge, and then you go into Austin, you have to be able, because these are going to be high caliber SEC programs. You definitely, if you want a chance at all to even make the playoffs at the end of the season, you have to show it. And I think in a vacuum right now, we can kind of take that Notre Dame game, because they're going to want to win at Notre Dame, because Notre Dame came in last year and kind of took their pride away for a little bit, and then they kind of bounced back at that Florida game. But there is a lot of vacuum on that defense, where you can't exactly project what that DB room is going to be, like you and Carter Carroll's discussed in the spring. And I think we'll have more of a good idea once we've gotten past SEC media days and these practices going in, and you'll definitely have an article out projecting your starters and stuff along those lines. We'll get to that probably later.
There's a lot of unknown, right? There's a lot of unknown with that group, because we know, I think, like, and I was doing this the other day, we know like what the defensive line is going to look like. I think I could, you put it in front of me, I could place those guys in there, and I could tell you who the rotational guys are. Because they're kind of overloaded with edge rushers right now. They went out and they knew we need to get as many talented guys as we can to help Cassius Howe, Rylan Kennedy, and then your interior with Albert Regis and DJ Hicks. Getting Tyler Odienem was huge, because I think he's probably going to be one of the best players on that team next season, because he's just running ready to go, right? He's had his time at Iowa State. He started there. He was one of the best interior guys. He's going to come in and just make an impact immediately, which should help out the rest of the group. And then you kind of move to linebacker, and you think, it might be some depth issues, but they've got a lot of guys, right? They've got guys coming back. They've got some young up and coming guys. They've got a freshman in Noah McHale who could end up make a little splash in rotation, especially if injuries happen or if he has a good fall camp. And then it's just, you kind of go in the secondary and you look at the names and you look at some of the added depth, but you just don't know yet, because this is one of the most fickle positions in terms of injuries and guys not living up to their potential sometimes. And maybe it's the scheme or how they're used. But the name I'm going to keep talking about, and my team at Aggies Wire have talked about, is Des Ricks, because I think one of the reasons Lyle Hemphill was brought in was to bring out the potential of guys like Ricks, who's a 5-star player, who has the length, he has the build, he has the speed. It's just the instincts, and it's the ability to understand what Elko wants from him in the secondary. You can't be static. You can't just sit. You really have to really put the work in this offseason to learn this defense, watch film, understand what these quarterbacks are doing. And if you can do that, you've got the attributes, right? We've seen him. He made one of the interceptions he made last year against Arkansas. He can do this job. It's just putting it together. That was one of the reasons he transferred from Alabama. So there are tons of names. I mentioned Bryce Anderson already at safety. That's another player I believe is going to take a big step because of Hemphill's teaching and because it's his final year and he needs to put together a good season to have a chance at the NFL. So there's a lot of maybes and what ifs, but I think you can feel more comfortable knowing that you have Willie, you have Julian Humphrey. So these are two guys who you believe are going to be consistent starters who aren't going to kill you on the boundary. And especially in an SEC, look, you get to avoid Ryan Williams, so that's nice. But you're also going to play a lot of LSU's got a lot of good new guys in there. It's going to be
Varian Brown. You're going to play Nick Anderson.
Yeah, and Nick Anderson, if he can stay healthy, is going to be one of the toughest covers in college football. But here's the thing. I think that you got the mental guys for that. You've got Will Lee is a dog, as they say. I mean, that dude wants to take on the number one guy every game, and he's shown that ability to do so. So I just think this unit just can't kill A&M, right? Because they killed A&M a couple times last year.
Exactly.
That was the problem. And that's the thing. That's why you hire guys like me or anybody else who we're paid not to just give our opinion and go, well, this happened because we're paid to do the research and look at the film and really understand why A&M struggled in certain areas. And coming out of the offseason, when I did my deep dive, I just looked back and said, Marshall Reed isn't the problem. He's not the problem. This running game will be better. It's the defense. It's the secondary. They've got to do that. And he made the changes necessary. We'll see if that comes to fruition.
Hopefully it does.